A few years back, right after I graduated college, my parents moved to a smaller house closer to their jobs and let me stay in our old family home while I saved up enough for my own place. I was never really scared staying there alone. My parents came to visit almost every weekend. The neighborhood was quiet, and it was the house I grew up in, so it felt safe. 3 houses down lived an older woman named Mabel. Her husband had passed almost a decade prior. Her kids all lived out of state, and she was by herself most of the time. She was the sweetest lady. She'd bring over fresh-baked cookies and homemade jam all the time, and I'd help her out with yard work or moving heavy furniture whenever she needed it. One June, she told me her daughter down in Florida was about to have a baby, and she was going to stay down there for almost a month to help out. She asked if I could house sit for her, grab the mail every day, water her plants, feed her cat, and just check in to make sure nothing was wrong. I said yes immediately. It felt like the least I could do for all the stuff she'd done for me, and the work was easy enough. For the first 3 days, everything was totally normal. Then the weird stuff started. The first odd night, I stopped by her cat, which was always super friendly, the kind that rubs against your legs the second you walk in, was standing at the end of the hallway back arched, hissing straight at the front door. I figured a neighborhood dog had wandered through the yard, so I clapped my hands and called for him, but he wouldn't even look at me. He just kept staring at that door, hissing like there was something right on the other side. I opened the door to check. The yard was empty. No dogs, no footprints, nothing. When I turned around, the cat had bolted under Mabel's bed and wouldn't come out for the rest of the night. I wrote it off as him missing his owner. Didn't think much of it. The next day after work, I stopped by again to fill the cat's food bowl. I was standing in the kitchen when I heard a noise coming from the ground floor guest bedroom down the hall. It sounded exactly like someone dragging a heavy wooden chair across the hardwood floor. I froze, waited a second, and heard it again. Clearer this time. I grabbed a big cast iron skillet off the stove for protection and crept down the hall. Nobody was in that room, but the wooden desk chair that I'd pushed all the way against the wall last time I checked the place was now pulled out right in the middle of the floor. I pushed it back, checked every window. They were all locked from the inside. I felt that twist in my stomach you get when you know something is off. But I told myself the cat must have somehow pushed it, even though I knew full well that cat was barely 9 pounds and couldn't have moved that heavy chair if it tried. On night 4, I had to sleep over. Mabel called me panicking because her security company had alerted her to motion sensors going off in the backyard, and she couldn't reach the local police all the way from Florida. She begged me to stay the night to make sure no one was breaking in. I said yes, grabbed my sleeping bag and a flashlight, and headed over around 10 p.m. It was pouring rain that night, thunder and lightning rolling non-stop, so the house felt extra dark even with all the hallway lights on. I watched TV on her couch for an hour, fell asleep around midnight. I woke up to knocking. Not loud banging, soft, steady. 3 slow knocks at a time. Tap, tap, tap. It would pause a few seconds, then start again. I checked my phone. It was 3:17 a.m. I figured it was the cops doing a wellness check after the security alert, so I got up and walked to the front door. Before I unlocked it, I looked through the peephole. The porch light was on. Rain was pouring down, but there was nobody standing there. I waited a full minute, staring. The knocking stopped. I cracked the door open, and all I got was rain blowing in my face. The front yard was completely empty. I locked the door back up, pushed the heavy armchair in front of it for good measure, and started walking back to the couch. I'd barely sat down for 10 seconds when the knocking started again. But this time it wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the window directly behind me. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. I slowly turned my head to look at the window. The curtain was pulled halfway open, and I could see straight out into the yard. There was a man standing right there, his face pressed flat against the glass, staring inside. I almost passed out from fear I didn't know him. He was wearing a dirty, ripped jacket, his long hair matted to his face, and the worst part was he was smiling. Not a friendly smile, a stiff, stretched smile that pulled his lips all the way back to his jaws, but his eyes were completely blank, like he wasn't even seeing me. He lifted one finger and knocked on the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. I couldn't move. I just sat there staring at him, and he stared right back, holding that same smile. It lasted maybe 5 minutes, maybe longer. I lost track of time. Then all of a sudden, he turned his head like someone down the hall had called his name. He stood up straight. The smile dropped, and he stepped out of view of the window. I snapped out of it, ran to lock every window and door in the house, called 901 there, and told them there was a prowler outside trying to break in. The cops showed up 10 minutes later, searched the whole yard and perimeter. They never found the man. But they did find muddy footprints leading around to the back of the house, and tons of them right under that living room window, like he'd been standing there for a long time. The worst thing they found was footprints leading right up to the back door, and scratch marks all over the lock, like someone had been trying to pry it open, but hadn't gotten in yet. I didn't stay there another second. I ran back to my house, locked every door, and slept with a baseball bat next to me for the rest of the night. The next morning, I called Mabel and told her everything, and she flew home early from Florida. When she got back, we searched the whole house top to bottom. Nothing valuable was missing. But when we opened the closet in that guest bedroom, the one where I'd heard the chair dragging a few days earlier, we found old sleeping bags, empty water bottles, and moldy, half-eaten food wrappers. Someone had been living in that closet, probably for days before I started house sitting. The cops said it was most likely a homeless guy who'd snuck in when Mabel left, hiding in the closet and stealing her food. But they couldn't explain why he didn't take anything of value, why he stood outside my window smiling at me for 5 minutes straight, or why he ran off instead of hurting me when he had the chance. I never wanted to find out the answers either. After that night, I never house sat for anyone ever again. To this day, if I hear a soft knock on my door after dark, my stomach drops. When I was 22, me and 3 of my best friends decided to go fishing at a lake deep in the national forest, about a 40-minute drive from our hometown. We'd heard the lake was loaded with big bass, and since we were all on summer break with nothing better to do, we planned to fish from late afternoon all the way until sunrise. Everyone says night fishing is way better for catching big fish, or at least that's what my friend's cousin swore. We brought 2 inflatable boats, a tent, a cooler full of beer and snacks, and got to the lake around 5 p.m. We set up camp right by the shore, got our rods ready, and paddled out to the middle of the lake just as it started getting dark. We caught a ton of fish the first few hours, drank, joked around, and by 1 a.m. 2 of our friends were too drunk to stay out on the water. So they paddled back to shore to crash in the tent. Me and my friend Jace stayed out, wanting to catch a few more before calling it a night. It was just us out in the middle of the lake, light only from the headlamps clipped to our hats and faint moonlight on the water. Around 2:30 a.m., Jace suddenly told me to shut up. I asked him what was wrong, and he pointed about 50 yards away from our boat, saying he saw another boat out there. I looked where he was pointing, and sure enough, there was a small wooden rowboat drifting slowly across the water. At first, I figured it was another group out night fishing just like us, so I waved my flashlight to say hi. Nobody waved back. The boat just kept drifting slowly toward us. When it got within 20 yards, I could make out the person sitting in it. He was an older guy, wearing a faded orange life jacket, a baseball cap pulled down so low it covered most of his face. He was sitting perfectly still at the back of the boat, hands resting on his knees, staring right at us. Jace yelled out, "Hey man, catching anything out there?" No answer. The guy didn't move. I felt that same wrong feeling I got at Mabel's house. Every night fisherman I'd ever met was super friendly, would wave or yell back if you called out to them. This guy just sat there, not moving, not saying a word. Then all of a sudden, his boat changed direction and started heading straight for us. It wasn't drifting. Someone was steering it right at us, but I couldn't see any oars in his hands. It was picking up speed too, and now the guy was tilting his head to the side like he was curious about us. Jace whispered to me, "We need to get back to shore. This guy is creeping me the hell out." I didn't argue. We clipped the tiny electric motor to the back of the inflatable. We'd avoided using it before because we didn't want to scare the fish, and cranked it full speed back to shore. When I looked back over my shoulder, the guy in the wooden boat was speeding up too, chasing us. There was no motor sound. It moved completely silent, cutting 2 white lines of wake at the bow. Now I could see his face clearer because he'd lifted his chin. His skin was pale gray, his eyes wide open. He wasn't blinking. And there were no oars on that boat at all. Nothing in it but him and a broken fishing rod lying on the floorboards. I have no idea how he was moving it. We got to the shore as fast as the little motor would take us, bailed out of the boat before it even stopped moving, and ran straight for the tent. We woke our other 2 friends up, told them there was some psycho chasing us out on the water, and all 4 of us hid behind a big pine tree near the tree line, watching the lake. The man's boat pulled right up to the shore, but he didn't step onto land. He just sat there at the back of the boat, staring right at the spot where we were hiding. We stood there for almost half an hour, nobody daring to talk loud or move. Then slowly, his boat backed away, turned around, and vanished into the fog that was starting to roll across the lake. None of us slept the rest of the night. We packed up all our stuff the second the sky started getting light and drove straight home, not even bothering to stay for morning fishing. Later, I asked an old guy who ran the bait shop near the lake about the man in the wooden rowboat. As soon as I described him, his face went white. He told me that 15 years before, a man had gone out night fishing alone on that lake. His boat capsized, and he drowned. They found his wooden rowboat drifting a few days later, but they never found his body. Locals say that on new moon nights, you can still see him rowing that boat out on the lake, chasing anyone out fishing after dark. I don't know if that was him, or just some random weirdo who liked scaring people out on the water. But I do know one thing. I never went night fishing on that lake again. Even now, if I'm out on a boat during the day, I still glance over my shoulder every few minutes, half expecting to see that silent wooden boat creeping up behind me. Right after I finished community college, I got a part-time job working the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station convenience store, just off the highway to help pay off my student loans. My shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and usually there was another guy scheduled with me. But that month, my coworker got sick and had to take 2 weeks off, so I was stuck running the whole store by myself every night. I didn't mind at first. The area was pretty safe, and nights were usually slow, mostly just truckers stopping for coffee and energy drinks, or groups of kids coming home from parties grabbing snacks. I'd sit behind the counter reading or watching shows on my phone between customers. It was easy work. My third night alone, around 2:40 a.m., a man walked into the store. He was wearing a long black winter coat that went down to his knees, hood pulled up so it covered most of his face, even though it was the middle of July, 80 degrees outside, even at that hour. I greeted him like I did every customer. "Hey man, let me know if you need help finding anything." He didn't answer. He walked straight to the back aisle where the canned food was and just stood there staring at the shelves. I kept an eye on him, figuring he might be trying to shoplift something, but I didn't want to hover and make him uncomfortable, so I went back to my phone, glancing up every so often. He stood there for 15 whole minutes. He didn't touch a single item on the shelf, just stood there staring. I started getting annoyed, so I called out, "You need help finding something back there?" That's when he turned around. Even with his hood pulled up, I could see he was smiling. He shook his head, then slowly walked up to the register. I thought he was finally going to buy something, but when he got to the counter, he just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, staring straight at my face. I asked again, "Did you want to buy something?" He opened his mouth and spoke in a tiny, almost whispering voice. "I'm trying to find the road to Maplewood." I told him to just stay on the highway for another 15 miles. There were big signs marking the exit. He couldn't miss it. He nodded, still holding that same smile, then turned and walked away. But he didn't walk out the front door. He walked toward the bathroom down the short hallway next to the register. I waited 5 minutes. He didn't come out. I figured he was just using the toilet, so I didn't think anything of it. 10 minutes went by, still no sign of him. I started getting worried. That bathroom didn't even have a lock on the inside. So if something was wrong, he would have called out. I grabbed the heavy rubber bat the store kept behind the counter for robberies, walked down the hall to the bathroom and knocked. "Hey buddy, you okay in there?" No answer. I pushed the door open. The bathroom was empty. Nobody was there. The small window on the wall was still locked from the inside. There was no other way out of that bathroom except the door I'd just walked through. I stood there confused. There was no way he could have gotten out without walking right past the register where I'd been sitting the whole time. I checked the back stockroom door. It was locked tight too. I shook my head, told myself I was tired from the late shift and must have zoned out when he left, and walked back to the counter to calm down. That's when I glanced up at the security camera monitor mounted above the register. I pulled up the footage from when the guy walked in, rewound it to watch what happened. The camera showed him come in, walk to the back aisle, stand there 15 minutes, walk up to the counter and talk to me, then head down the hall toward the bathroom. But on the camera, he never went into the bathroom. He stopped right in the middle of the hallway, turned to face the security camera mounted on the ceiling, and he stood there. He didn't move. He was still smiling. He stood there for the full 10 minutes I thought he was in the bathroom. Then slowly, he started walking back down the hall toward the register, right as I was getting up to go check the bathroom. On the footage, I saw him crouch down and hide behind the gum display right next to the register, as I walked right past him down the hall. Then, while I was in the bathroom checking stalls, he stood up, walked slowly out the front door, and disappeared. Goosebumps broke out all over my body. He'd been right there, hiding 2 feet away from me when I walked past him. I could have reached out and touched him if I'd stretched my arm out. I locked the front door immediately, called my manager, and begged him to come in early. He got there 20 minutes later. I showed him the footage, and he saw exactly what I saw. We never saw that guy again. We never found out who he was or why he did what he did. But the thing that haunts me most is when I slowed the footage down to look closer. I could see past the cuff of his coat sleeve on his hand. There were old, deep scratch marks, and he was holding a big, sharp kitchen knife in his hand. I quit that job the next week. I never wanted to find out what would have happened if I'd turned around while he was hiding behind that gum rack, or if he'd decided to wait for me to come back to the counter instead of leaving.